Everyone says love finds you when you're not looking. They're wrong. Sometimes love finds you when you're hiding under a billionaire's desk during the most important business meeting of his life, and you're 11 months old. I lost everything running from a loan shark who wanted to sell my baby. Then I learned this. The most dangerous place to hide is also the safest. If you hide in plain sight with someone who has more power than your enemies could ever imagine. Do-Yeon Park didn't believe in accidents. Every signature, every deal, every breath in his billion-dollar empire was calculated. So when he heard a wet, tiny sneeze from directly beneath his desk during a merger meeting with 15 stone-faced executives, he knew his perfectly controlled world had just been invaded. But here's what nobody expected. Instead of calling security, he looked at that grinning baby with her chubby hand wrapped around his $1,000 shoe, then at the terrified woman frozen by the door, and said 5 words that changed 3 lives forever. Finally, you brought her to see me. This is Afro-Korean Storyverse, where a single moment under a CEO's desk rewrites destiny, and where the most dangerous contracts are signed with the heart. Before I show you how a man who'd never held a baby became a father in a boardroom, and how a woman hiding in shadows became the only person who could save him, subscribe to see what happens when Seoul's coldest billionaire meets the one thing money can't control. Comment where you're watching from. I'd love to say hello, to know how far this story travels. Let me take you back 6 hours before that sneeze, because understanding why I was hiding under that desk requires understanding what I was running from. My name is Felicia Wright, 26 years old, single mother, 3 weeks in Seoul. Working as a night janitor in the KD Group building because it was the only job that didn't require papers I couldn't get. That morning, my babysitter canceled. Again. I stared at Mia, 11 months of pure chaos wrapped in the world's cutest package, and did the math. Miss work, lose the job, bring her, risk everything. I chose risk. I strapped her to my chest, praying she'd sleep through my shift. She did. Until 7:30 p.m., when I was cleaning the executive floor and heard voices approaching. Male voices, powerful voices, the kind that fire people like me without blinking. I panicked, ducked into the nearest office, didn't realize until the lights came on that I'd just hidden in the CEO's private conference room, with a baby, during what sounded like the most important meeting of the year. But here's the twist nobody saw coming. Do-Yeon Park walked into that room like he owned the world, because technically, he did. 31 years old. Billionaire, Korea's most eligible bachelor, face carved from marble, heart rumored to be made of ice. I was pressed against the wall behind a filing cabinet, one hand over Mia's mouth, praying she wouldn't make a sound. She was wiggling, getting fussy. I could feel the sneeze building in her tiny body like a time bomb. 15 executives in designer suits filled the room. Japanese merger partners, lawyers, the kind of people who negotiate in millions before lunch. And Do-Yeon commanded them all with a voice so cold it could freeze vodka. That's when Mia sneezed. Not a quiet sneeze. A wet, loud, impossible to ignore baby sneeze that echoed off the marble floors like a gunshot. Every head turned toward Do-Yeon's desk, because the sneeze hadn't come from behind the filing cabinet. In the chaos, Mia had crawled under his desk. And now she was staring up at Korea's most powerful CEO with her huge brown eyes, one chubby hand wrapped around his shoe, drool on his $1,000 leather. The room went silent. I stopped breathing. But Do-Yeon? He looked down at my baby, and something flickered across that ice-cold face. Something almost human. Then he looked at me, frozen by the door, and I knew my life was over. Until he said those 5 words that made no sense. Finally, you brought her to see me. The Japanese executives exchanged confused glances. The lawyers started whispering. And I stood there trying to understand why Korea's most eligible bachelor was pretending to know my daughter. Do-Yeon reached down, awkwardly, like he'd never touched a baby before, and picked up Mia. She immediately grabbed his tie and giggled like she'd just made a new best friend. He held her at arm's length, looking mildly terrified, but his voice when he spoke was pure confidence. "Gentlemen, my apologies. Family emergency. We'll reschedule." Not a question, a dismissal. The room cleared in stages. Confused bows, uncomfortable glances, phones coming out to text what had just happened to whoever needed to know. By 8:15 p.m., we were alone. A CEO who'd just committed corporate suicide, a baby trying to eat his tie, and me wishing the floor would swallow me whole. Doyun set Mia on his desk, one hand on her back so she wouldn't roll off. Then he looked at me with those calculating eyes, and I knew whatever came next would change everything. "Close the door." I obeyed because what else could I do? "What's your name?" "Felicia." My voice shook. "I work nights. Cleaning. I'm so sorry. My babysitter canceled and I couldn't afford to miss." "Stop." He held up one hand. "I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say. Because in approximately 6 hours, every news outlet in Seoul will run a story about me having a secret child." My stomach dropped. "Unless," he continued, his tone shifting into something businesslike, "we control the narrative first." That's when he made me an offer that shouldn't have been possible. "Move into my penthouse, tonight. You and the baby. We tell everyone she's mine, you're her mother, and we've been keeping this private." I stared at him. "You want me to lie? I want you to survive." His eyes locked onto mine. "You're running from something. I can see it in how you stand near exits, how you flinch at loud voices. I'm being forced into a marriage by a grandmother who thinks a wife will make me human. You need protection and money. I need a reason to refuse every matchmaking attempt for the next year. This is insane. This is business." He pulled out a contract that looked pre-prepared. 6 months. Live in my home, appear as my partner when required, keep the baby visible. In exchange, 200 million won upfront, full security, and whoever you're hiding from never finds you. 200 million won. More money than I'd seen in my life. Freedom. Safety. Everything I'd been praying for. "Why would you do this?" Doyun looked at Mia, who'd fallen asleep against his shoulder. "Because for the first time in 3 years, my board looked at me like I was a person instead of a machine. That baby just saved me from a future I didn't choose." He held out the contract. "Sign it or walk out and take your chances." I took the pen. My hand steadied as I signed next to his precise signature. "Pack nothing," he said. "Everything you need will be provided." But here's what I didn't know then, what neither of us knew. This contract was about to become the most dangerous document either of us had ever signed. Because the man I was running from, he was already in Seoul. And he was about to discover I'd just moved in with one of the richest men in Korea. Doyun's penthouse was a museum designed by someone who'd never seen a child. Glass, steel, sharp edges everywhere. Mia took one look and immediately crawled toward the nearest death trap. "She can't hurt it," Doyun said, though his expression said otherwise. "She's teething. She can hurt anything." That first night, I watched Korea's coldest CEO try to comfort a crying baby by holding her at arm's length like a malfunctioning appliance. I showed him how to hold her close, support her head, pat her back gently. He obeyed with mechanical precision. Pat. 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 Mia's crying slowed, then stopped. She grabbed his tie and giggled. "She likes you," I said softly. "She doesn't know any better." But over the next 3 days, something shifted. Doyun's team transformed the penthouse overnight. Foam corners, cabinet locks, a nursery that looked like a palace. They transformed me too. A woman named Minji arrived with designer clothes, a makeup artist, and orders to make me gala-ready. 4 hours later, I stood in front of a mirror in a midnight blue dress and didn't recognize myself. When Doyun saw me, he went completely still. His eyes traveled from my face to the dress and back, something breaking in that calculated expression. You look. He searched for a word. Different. Bad different? No. Too quickly. Then quieter. No. Not bad. The air between us charged with something neither of us wanted to name, but we didn't have time to examine it, because the Seoul Charity Gala was in 24 hours, and I was about to meet the woman who believed Do-yoon should have been hers. Ji-won appeared at the gala like a beautiful knife. Designer gown, diamond necklace, eyes that looked at Do-yoon like stolen property. You must be the surprise everyone's talking about, she said, her smile razor sharp. The cleaner who caught our golden bachelor. Ji-won, that's enough, Do-yoon warned. I'm only saying what everyone's thinking. We were supposed to be married, you know. Our families had an arrangement. She studied me like an interesting specimen. But he always comes back to his own kind eventually. People who understand his world, his obligations. The words hit like carefully aimed darts. That old shame crept up my spine. The shame of being poor, unwanted, temporary. You don't know anything about her, Do-yoon said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. You want the truth? Felicia is the best thing that's happened to me in 3 years. She's brave and kind and stronger than you could understand. She's a better mother in 11 months than some people are in a lifetime. He stepped closer, putting himself between us. You were a contract I refused to sign. She's a choice I make every morning. The room went quiet. People stared. Then Do-yoon turned to me, cupped my face in his hands, right there in front of everyone, and kissed me. Not for show. He kissed me like I was oxygen and he'd been drowning. Like I was the only real thing in a room full of expensive illusions. I kissed him back. Forgot we were in public. Forgot this was supposed to be fake. Kissed him like he was home. When we broke apart, cameras flashed. Ji-won had vanished. And Do-yoon was looking at me like he'd just realized something terrifying and wonderful. That wasn't part of the contract, I whispered. No, he agreed. It wasn't. But here's what we didn't know. While we were falling in love at that gala, someone was taking photos, building a case, getting ready to destroy everything we'd built. 3 days after the kiss that changed everything, Do-yoon got sick. Fever of 39 degrees, throat like broken glass. I physically blocked his bedroom door when he tried to go to work. Back to bed. I have 3 meetings. You have pneumonia. The meetings can wait. He wanted to argue but let me guide him back to bed because the room kept tilting. I brought medicine and homemade soup, then left him to sleep. 4 hours later, I was playing peekaboo with Mia on the living room floor when Do-yoon found us. The afternoon light turned everything golden. Mia was laughing that pure, uncontrollable baby laughter, and I was completely unguarded for the first time since we'd met. Do-yoon stood in the doorway in his silk robe and just watched. Something in his chest cracked open. Something he'd locked down since his parents died 3 years ago. "Wanna try?" I asked. He shouldn't. He had an empire to run. But Mia was holding out her arms, and he found himself sitting on the floor like it was natural. Just hide your face, then show it. He felt ridiculous. He'd negotiated billion-dollar deals, made grown men cry in boardrooms. Now he was playing peekaboo. He covered his face, paused, revealed himself. Mia erupted into laughter so pure that Do-yoon forgot how to breathe. She lunged forward, grabbing his face with tiny hands, laughing like he'd performed the greatest magic trick ever conceived. Do-yoon laughed. For the first time in 3 years, he threw his head back and laughed until his fever-sore throat hurt, until tears pricked his eyes. "I didn't know you could laugh like that," I said softly. He looked down at Mia, asleep in his lap. Neither did I. But while we were discovering what family felt like, someone was watching. Taking notes, building a file that would explode our lives in exactly 48 hours. The news broke at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. KD Group CEO's secret family exposed as fraud. The article had everything. My real name. My debt. Marcus Chen's allegations that I was a con artist, fake passport documents, speculation about Mia's real father. Anonymous sources saying the board was furious. How did they get this? My hand shook. My uncle. Do-Yun's jaw was granite. Investigating you since day one. This is his insurance policy. Proof I'm incompetent, compromised, should be removed as CEO. He pocketed his phone. The board wants me to make a statement denouncing you. My stomach dropped through the floor. Then do it. What? Tell them I lied, that you're ending things immediately. This is my fault. Stop. He gripped my shoulders. I'm not denouncing you. Your company is just a company. Buildings and numbers. His eyes were fierce. You and Mia are real. I don't care what they want me to say. I'm not giving you up. But fighting meant staying visible. Watching his stock prices plummet. Watching everything he'd built crumble because of me. I made my decision that night. After Do-Yun fell asleep from stress, I packed 2 bags, left everything he'd given me except what we came with. I wrote a note. I'm sorry. You deserve better than someone who brings shadows into your light. Don't look for me. I walked out at midnight, back into the darkness where people like me belonged, but leaving Do-Yun turned out to be the biggest mistake of my life, because Marcus Chen had been waiting for exactly this moment. The motel near the port was cheap and anonymous. I paid cash for 3 nights, enough time to find a boat to somewhere Marcus couldn't follow. The knock came at 11 p.m. Open the door, Felicia. I know you're in there. Marcus Chen's voice. Patient, terrifying. The door exploded inward. 3 men moved with professional efficiency. One grabbed me, one smashed my phone, the third picked up Mia's crib, baby and all. No, I struggled, but he was twice my size. Don't touch her. Please. Marcus walked in behind them in an expensive suit. Hello, Felicia. You've been difficult to pin down. He glanced at Mia, who was crying. Cute kid. Looks like she'd be worth a lot to the right buyer, especially since she's connected to the Park family. My blood turned to ice. You wouldn't. I would, unless your boyfriend pays what you owe. $1 billion should cover it. He's not my boyfriend. The whole thing was fake. Then I guess we're selling the baby. They dragged us to a warehouse by the shipyard, tied me to a chair, set Mia's crib just out of reach, close enough to see her screaming but not comfort her. Marcus made his call on speaker. Mr. Park, I have something that belongs to you. Where are they? Do-Yun's voice was tight, controlled. Safe. For now. 1 billion won, within the hour, or I start selling pieces. Done. No hesitation. Give me the account number. I need collateral. I'm keeping the baby until the money clears. Just as insurance. Silence. Then. If you hurt either of them, I will destroy everything you've ever touched. There won't be a place on earth you can hide. Marcus laughed. 53 minutes, Mr. Park. Better hope you care enough. He hung up. I watched Mia scream herself hoarse, my heart tearing apart. But Do-Yun had never needed an hour. Because he'd done what he did best. He'd planned. Activated every resource. Called in every favor. And then, he'd gotten in his car alone and driven into a typhoon to get his family back. The warehouse door exploded open at 11:47 p.m. Do-Yun walked through like an avenging angel, soaked from rain, CEO clothes ruined with mud. Time's not up yet, Marcus said, hand moving toward his gun. I'm not here to negotiate. Do-Yun's voice was arctic. Behind him, police lights flooded the entrance. Sirens wailed. You made a mistake, Mr. Chen. You threatened my family, and I don't lose. Chaos. Marcus's men ran. Police swarmed. Marcus tried to grab Mia as a last-ditch hostage, but Do-Yun moved faster than I'd ever seen, crossed 15 feet in seconds, slammed into Marcus with 3 years of grief and rage turned into protective fury. They went down hard. Do-Yun's fist connected with Marcus's jaw once, twice, 3 times, until police pulled him off. Then he went straight to Mia, scooped her out of the crib with shaking hands, held her against his chest while she screamed. Turned to me, still tied to the chair. "I told you not to look for me," I whispered. "I don't take orders well." He knelt, Mia between us, untied my hands. "Did he hurt you?" I shook my head, unable to speak. "Don't ever do that again. Don't ever think you're saving me by leaving." His voice cracked. "I spent 3 years not caring if I lived or died. Then you showed up under my desk and gave me a reason. Don't take that away." "Your company. I don't care about the company." He pulled back so I could see his eyes. "I resigned this afternoon. Gave my uncle what he wanted. The board can have KD Group. I'm starting over. With you, if you'll let me." I stared. "You resigned?" "I did." "You gave up your company. For me. For us." He held Mia closer. "Having everything doesn't mean much if you're alone. But having you two, that's enough. That's everything." I kissed him. Right there in that warehouse with police everywhere, and both of us soaked and traumatized and alive. Kissed him like yes, like always, like forever. But this story, it doesn't end in a warehouse. 3 days later at the airport, Do-Yun stood in jeans and a sweater, the most casual I'd ever seen him, holding Mia like he'd been doing it forever. "Last chance to change your mind," I said. "Not a chance. Fresh start. New country, new life. You could have kept the company. I meant what I said. I choose you. I choose being Mia's father over being anyone's CEO." He reached into his pocket, pulled out folded paper. "I think it's time we replaced that old contract." I unfolded it, expected legal jargon, found a marriage license application. Blank, except for his signature. "No deadlines this time," he said softly. "No 6-month clause, just us. Forever, if you'll sign it." I looked at the paper, at the man holding my daughter, at the future I'd stopped believing in, thought about that first night under his desk, about Mia's sneeze that changed 3 lives. I pulled out a pen, signed my name next to his. Yes, forever. He kissed me again. Mia, sandwiched between us, grabbed both our faces like she was sealing the deal herself. We boarded the plane to Vancouver 20 minutes later. As we took off, I looked out at Seoul disappearing below and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because I was running away this time, because I was running toward something, toward a future with a man who'd given up everything to keep me. Mia fell asleep between us, her tiny hand wrapped around Do-Yun's finger. I rested my head on his shoulder. "Thank you for finding us that day. Thank you for sneaking into my office. Best security breach I ever had." 3 months later, we got married on a beach in Vancouver with exactly 3 guests. Do-Yun's grandmother, Mia, who ate sand, and a confused photographer who couldn't understand why a billionaire's grandson was getting married in jeans. 6 months after that, Do-Yun's uncle was arrested for embezzlement. The board begged Do-Yun to return. He declined politely and used the settlement money to start a nonprofit helping women escape abusive situations. 2 years later, Mia took her first steps at a park in Vancouver, running straight into her father's arms while I cried happy tears and took 17 blurry photos. And sometimes, late at night when Mia was asleep and we were curled on our couch in our house that actually felt like a home, I'd look at Do-Yun and remember that terrifying moment when a baby sneezed under a desk and changed everything. "Best accident ever," I'd whisper. And Do-Yun, who'd learned how to smile again, who'd learned that family was worth more than empires, would pull me closer and agree. Best accident ever. But here's something I never told you about that first night in Do-Yun's penthouse. Something I discovered 3 years later when Mia was old enough to ask questions about how we met. Do-Yun had a secret too, one that explained why he recognized Mia that first night, why he said, "Finally you brought her to see me," like he'd been waiting. That story? That's one we're saving for when Mia's older. But if you want to know what Do-yeon was really hiding and why a billionaire CEO would risk everything for a stranger and her baby, subscribe now because that truth, it changes everything you just heard. Some secrets are worth protecting, some are worth revealing, and some, they're worth an entire other story.